Hello and welcome to a new video. In my last video, I talked about Polish shocks as an American living in Poland. So today I'm going to turn the tables and we're going to have a Polish man here, actually a friend of mine. His name is Dominic, and he's going to talk about the shocks he had as a Polish person in America. So this is Dominic. He's going to tell us, and I'm anxious to hear what he has to say about the shocks of a Polish person in America. Take it away, Dominic.
Hi guys, just like you, I watched Kerry's video about his shocks in Poland. I had a bit of think about what were my shocks in US, and that's what I want to share with you guys today. My first shock was how similar it is. And that was the biggest shock when I went to San Francisco, because that's really a long way away from Poland, right? So you fly for many hours, you land there, and it's kind of samey. I mean, people, right? The culture. It's not that far off, which shouldn't be surprising really, because the dominant culture in US is kind of an amalgamation of that British, German, Italian, Ireland culture. It's only I think lately that there are more influences from Latino culture or Asian culture, but it's still predominantly that Western European culture. The second cultural shock is, let's make one on the lighter side. Well, toilets. And toilets in the US are bizarre in many ways. First of all, you get those huge bowls filled with sea of water, right? Which is quite bizarre. I have no idea why do you need to have like a few gallons of water in your toilet bowl. And second thing is how for public toilets, the gaps in the stalls, which are truly bizarre. I mean, you go into a toilet and you can see everything that's going on inside the stalls, and it's disgusting, to tell you the truth. I hated it. I was working in a co-work in San Francisco, and I hated going to the toilet there. Just always go there, do your stuff, go to wash your hands, and in the mirror you could see the stalls behind you, and there was Dave from accounting fighting for his life there, and it was not a pleasant sight, I can tell you. So toilets, very bizarre. Another shock is related to homelessness. The cultural acceptance of homelessness in US, and how much different it is in Europe. The homelessness as a whole, but also how it is approached in US. I mean, in San Francisco, when you go through the city, you get those tall skyscrapers where wealthiest companies in the world have their headquarters. And between them you have alleys with rows and rows of tents and homeless people. Like the whole camps of homeless people. In the US, that's considered, let's use the word normal. I don't think it's a good word in this context, but like an everyday thing. It's not something out of ordinary. Well, in Europe that would be a complete shock, something like that. It would be unacceptable. So that's, I think, a very big cultural difference.
So that was quite interesting already. He's talked about the toilet situation there, and you do have, especially you have a lot more space underneath, I think, where you could kind of see under, but usually you can just see the legs kind of. So that's kind of weird, but kind of below the knee. But there is sometimes like a gap, I guess you were talking about. It's not something I really think of because I'm used to it, but I guess that would be kind of weird for a European coming to the US. Of course, the homeless crisis, I've talked about it in another video. It is absolutely out of control in the US. We just have too many homeless people, and it's not even just poor people. It's even people that are, even after the pandemic, that are somewhat middle class, and they've lost everything because of the pandemic. Or another reason, you can become sick in America because of the healthcare situation, the lack of it. We don't have healthcare, so you can actually become really sick and you can become homeless that way. So there's just a lot more homelessness, as he touched on, and yeah, that's 100% true.
Yeah, actually I saw that in San Francisco, because San Francisco was going through like a boom when I was there. And there were whole districts of the city which suddenly became very expensive. And there were plenty of homeless people who, for example, got sick. They didn't get well until the health insurance ran out, and without a job, still being sick, without the possibility to pay for their health care, well, they would end up on the street. And you could see in San Francisco like those people who were simply sick, right? Very often that was diabetes, and you could see it, right? That's this unpleasant condition like diabetes foot, I think. You could see that. And they were just there in the streets, in the wheelchairs, just begging for money. Well, in Europe that doesn't happen because of all the safety nets we have, for good and bad, depending on your opinion on that. But well, for a European, seeing that it's kind of a shock. Okay, maybe something on the lighter side now. Food. That there were a few shocks there. Well, first of all, US has good food, right? Wherever I went, there was good food in US. In California, Arizona, New Orleans, Orlando, everywhere you could find good food. But what was very bizarre to me and very, very weird was the size of the portions. So you would order something and you get this gigantic plate with heaps of food, and I couldn't finish it. And that was kind of a cultural shock for me, because in Europe you get portions that are much smaller. When I was little, my grandparents especially, they were always, you need to finish your food. You cannot leave anything on the plate. Where my grandparents were alive, were little during World War II and this period of scarcity later. And for them it was very important not to waste food, not to waste anything. And it's like very, very much ingrained into me. Don't waste food, you need to eat everything. And I wasn't really happy in US because of that, because I was constantly overeaten, bloated, I remember once in Florida I went for breakfast. I was near Kennedy Space Center, like a breakfast place, and I ordered like fried chicken with grits and coleslaw, and I got this huge plate, like half a table, and I tried to eat it all. I couldn't. I gave up in the end, but I actually had to walk out and go and sit under a tree for 15 minutes because I was really afraid I was going to throw up. That was a bit of a cultural shock, that size of plates and amount of food, and that everyone just eats half of it and throws it out.
Yeah, he's 100% right about that. We do have large portions. Usually people do like the large portions. You can order food and you'll get huge plates, massive plates of food. But another thing I think I wanted to touch on is, maybe you noticed it, the size of the people too. I think the people in general are larger. Was that a shocking thing for you?
For sure, that was a shock, because, well, first of all, what was a cultural shock was in general approach that Americans have to the topic of obesity. It's much more culturally acceptable in America. In Poland, people who are obese are generally considered unhealthy. If you see someone on the street who is obese, your first thought would be, well, probably he's unhealthy somehow. It's not that people are pressured into losing weight, but usually they get a few talks about, well, it's healthier to lose weight, and a lot of people exercise. Well, in America, it seems that it's just culturally accepted to be obese, and no one really notices it, bats an eye. And something also bizarre that I noticed is that I cannot put my finger on it, but obese people in Europe and obese people in America look different. After I was in US, I can spot an American in Wrocław, in Poland, because they just, for some reason, look different. I mean, obese people in Europe usually have this, not always, right? They have just a huge belly, where obese people in America are just huge everywhere, like huge hands, even toes and fingers and arms, and everything is like covered in a huge layer of fat. But in Poland, that's still like an exception to see like an obese person. Like, there are people who have a bit of a tummy, but like to be truly obese, that's rare. That's rare in Poland.
What about the transportation?
Well,
in America,
transportation, I think there was a broader shock there. And that broader shock was the distances. I mean, how huge is America, right? Because in Europe, we are kind of used to, we go somewhere and we look what is interesting around that place, and we find something. Oh, let's go there. It will be half an hour or an hour. And when we were in US, you would look for something interesting in the area, and there's this like monument or like a nature reserve somewhere. Okay, let's go there. How far is it? It's like 5 hours by car. It's the closest thing, and it's like, so the distances were shocking, and also the distances coupled with the lack of transportation. I mean, I had an option to go to Atlanta, and it was very exciting to me because I know that near Atlanta, on the coast of on the Gulf Coast, there is a museum where you can go and see a Iowa-class battleship, which is kind of something that I love. I love battleships. I really wanted to see it. And so I decided, well, let's check if there are any trains there. And there were trains. And you would have to go from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. and then back down. It would take over 24 hours, which is very, very bizarre for a European, because we can get a train basically everywhere and go anywhere, and it's just a few hours. So that's different. That was a shock.
Did you take a train in New York?
No. Actually, I'm lying. Actually, yes. When I was in San Francisco, I was using Caltrain almost daily. So that's a train that's running between from San Francisco to all the different towns on the peninsula. So, and
how was that compared to Europe? How was that?
The train was fine. It was perfectly okay. So you guys can do it if you try, right? There's California, San Francisco is a proof.
As Dominic was saying, yes, the United States is huge. It's absolutely massive. So when you talk about the US, it's not so easy to talk about it just like you talk about Poland, or you talk about Spain, or you talk about France, because it's so much larger. I mean, Poland is probably the size of Texas, something like that?
Poland,
or even smaller.
Probably smaller.
Smaller than Texas, and that's just one state out of 50 states. So you can imagine how massive it is. So you can go to many different states, and in fact, a lot of Americans, when they travel, they never even leave the US. They just go from state to state on vacation. They might go from the east to the west coast, or the north to the south, and that's a vacation for them.
What other shocks I had? Oh, that's a good one. No one walks. In Europe, walking is a thing that's kind of ingrained in our culture, and I think all of Europe, in Poland, that's very much so. We love spending our free times just walking somewhere. Some people like me, we consider taking a car to be a hassle, right? Usually I prefer to walk, and I personally walk a lot. Now when I was in US, no one is walking. It's a cultural norm in USA that you have to drive everywhere, which was bizarre to me, because sometimes there were really small distances and I couldn't walk. For example, in Europe, I love to just walk to my office, and it was roughly 40 minutes from my house. I would get up, I would drink my coffee, I would walk to my office. So when I went to US, to San Francisco, I tried to do the same. And then it turns out it's almost impossible to walk from where I was living to where I was working, because there are no pavements, and I would have to go alongside El Camino, so like a main highway that goes from San Francisco, which is not very safe. Actually, I think one of the most dangerous things I did in my life was one of the first days in San Francisco. I thought I will go home on foot, and I was walking in direction of my house, and then it turns out I have to walk a bit on the shoulder of El Camino. There's no pavement, nothing. I had my headlight, I was dangling it on my side, and the cars were just zooming past me, and I was walking there. It was probably one of the most dangerous things I did in my life. I was in San Francisco, I was there during Halloween, and I was at a party. And after the party, I checked, and it's just 20, and well, my house is only 20 minutes from here, so I walk. So I started walking home, and suddenly a car stops by me. And it was the CEO of my company. And turned out that he and his wife, they were returning home from some party, and suddenly she spots someone walking in the distance, and she tells her husband that well, there's someone walking there, and he's like, what? Someone is walking? Well, that it must be that crazy European Dominic. So let's go and check. And then it was me, right? So I was literally the only person walking out there in California that night, apparently.
Did you talk to anyone that asked about where you were from, and did you tell
Yeah.
them at Poland? Did they know where Poland was? Did they have any idea where Poland was
Yeah,
on the map?
it depends, right?
Okay.
So I had both encounters where people had no idea. So like, where are you from? Poland. Holland? Poland. Holland. No. Poland. Polonia. Okay. So
I bet they couldn't find it on the
yeah,
map,
there were
right?
things like that. On the other hand, surprisingly, a lot of people knew where Poland was, and actually we had one really nice encounter in Orlando, where we found an interesting pub with craft beer near the place we were staying, and we went there. We sat by the bar and started ordering different beers. And the bartender suddenly asked us, "Hey guys, where are you from?" And we said, "Poland." And he's like, "Wow, Poland, that's great. My niece is in military, and she's in Rzeszów. She's at the US military base in Rzeszów." And he started giving us free samples of different beers and things that wasn't on the tap yet. So it was really nice. Another shock, and mind you, I was in California, I think 7 or 8 years ago, how culturally acceptable drugs are. And I mean, it's mostly marijuana, but in Poland it's still forbidden, and the drugs are even pot. It's kind of like a bit of a taboo thing, right? You don't kind of smoke pot in public, and you don't kind of talk about it. But in California, like, it was everywhere, and it was actually very hard to go somewhere and don't smell that smell in the air, in public parks, on the streets, everywhere. You also had those services where you could order something like an Uber, which would bring you weed to your house, that was a cultural shock for me. And it's actually something very, very weird for a European. It was a lot easier to find someone smoking marijuana than to find someone smoking cigarettes. In Europe, that's...
Maybe call it Mary Jane.
Mary
That's
Jane.
for the YouTube censors.
Yeah.
Or something else.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a shock. And in general, I think any drugs are much more culturally acceptable in the US than they are for sure in Poland. I think in Europe, but maybe not the whole Europe. There's Netherlands, of course, but for sure in Poland they are not as culturally accepted as in US.
Of course, we have lighter drugs, like he was talking about, like the Mary Jane, but we have a lot of harder drugs, and it's a real problem in the US right now. There's a lot of people dying from it and becoming very, very sick. We have a lot of drugs out there now. We have this methamphetamine, and we have another drug that's quite dangerous, fentanyl. Fentanyl is very, very dangerous, and that's out there. We have a huge drug crisis in America. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think it would be shocking to a European, of course.
Yeah, that was shocking. And well, we have in Poland, it's not so bad now, it's more hidden, but we have a huge alcohol problem. So at least, so it's not that we don't have problems, right? With substances. It's just for you it's drugs, for us more alcohol.
Oh, we have alcohol.
Especially after communism, right? It was really bad, because one of the ways the totalitarian systems try to control people is there's always cheap alcohol available, because like drunk populace is easier to simply control and
subdue. It's the same in America. If you drive through a poor neighborhood, ghetto, you'll see a bunch of liquor stores.
So yeah, and that's a shame. Another thing in America, everything is bigger, and I don't mean that's not only people. Cars are bigger, houses are bigger, monuments are bigger, public art is bigger, everything is bigger, and I would say needlessly bigger. Because, well, I can certainly appreciate that you're a farmer, that you need a big pickup truck to work on your fields. But if you're a programmer in California, in the valley, I don't think you need to drive this huge Ram truck to work. I mean, what are you carrying? And Americans love big things, or maybe love when things are big, to the point where it's really a bit funny to us, and we would often joke, like we would go around the corner, do like this, another like a bit of ugly monument or like a sculpture that was just gigantic, and we had quite a few jokes about compensating for stuff and stuff like that. So that was a bit of a shock. We'll finish now, but we'll finish with a big one, maybe two big ones, and one of those is fear. And the shock was how culturally acceptable living in fear in US is, because almost everyone I met in US was living in fear of something. Some were living in fear of about their health because they couldn't afford health insurance, and I met quite a few people like that who would work low-paying jobs, especially in California, with high rent, and there was no chance in hell they could afford healthcare if something happens to them. Actually, I met one person, she was Polish. When she needed healthcare, it's actually cheaper for her to buy a plane ticket, go to Poland, get herself fixed, and then fly back to US. It was cheaper on the whole than going to a doctor in California. There was a lot of people who are afraid about their jobs, and because they had family to care for, and that was really influencing their choices and their life. We had conversations about that, you could hear that. And there was really a lot of people that were afraid about their safety. That was a bit bizarre, because well, like I told you, I like walking, right? And I'm a big dude, but that time, right, I smoked cigarettes. So when I was going from my office from the office to my house, I would often pass through like this suburb districts full of like those houses with grass in front of them. I would like pass people who were living there, very often like middle-aged white ladies, and they would always smile at me, and they would like say good morning, good morning. They could see there was fear in their eyes, like, what is this guy doing here? Is he going to do something? Or it's like, you don't really get that in Europe. You are cautious, but you kind of don't expect every stranger on the street to be crazy and do something to you. There was very often when we were told, don't go there, don't walk there, that district is bad, this district is bad, you cannot go there, people get shot there, and you cannot go outside of the town and just hike around the field. Someone will shoot you because it's maybe private property, and then they can shoot you, and it's just very, very weird. Which kind of ties me into another cultural shock. Was that bizarre idea of freedom in US, because when I was in US, I generally felt a lot more constrained and a lot less free. Sure, in Europe we have regulations and there are clear rules, you can do that, you cannot do that, and well, unless it's forbidden, it's allowed, right? And unless the law tells you cannot do something, you can do it. In the US, sometimes there's a lot less laws, but there is much more that is kind of culturally forbidden. You cannot go somewhere, you cannot go there, you cannot do that, this is dangerous, they can shoot you there. You cannot talk about a lot of things, so especially in your workplace, right? So some topics are totally taboo, you cannot even mention them. I mean, a lot of things are not fine to talk about in Europe, and that's a given, right? There are some things some opinions that are just not okay. But it's fine to have a conversation on a topic, but in US
we have that political correctness
yes,
angle. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
yeah.
in US that even is forbidden. So
right.
In general, in US I felt a lot more constrained than I feel in Europe, a lot less free. Even though everyone in US was absolutely convinced that US is the freest country of them all, and I think in general Americans live in the past. So the mindset in America, Americans behave like it's still maybe 1920s or 1960s, right? And where Europe was a bit shitty back then, right? And a lot of people were emigrating to US because back then, compared to Europe, USA were truly the freest place on earth, right?
Right.
But it's no longer so.
Yeah.
And I think America is America is falling back, and
Yes.
and it's
I agree. We have so many laws now that are nonsense, and as you said, a lot of people living in fear. The news is a cause of a lot of that, a lot of the propaganda that they're pushing, and constantly the crime. But there is a lot of truth, in fact, to that, and you'll see a lot of people, for that reason, they will just avoid you on the street in big cities, and they won't deal with you. And if there is something happens, like a crime, they will just go the other way because they don't want to be involved, because there is that danger. And there also is another thing, a lot of Americans carry guns now, and especially the criminals, so
Yeah.
it's a lot more dangerous situation.
That was also a shock, like the American gun culture. So even in California, right, in my co-work, it's like a small co-work in the middle of like a suburb. So I have no idea how much crime there was. I guess a really tiny amount. But there was like this security guy, and by the look of him, he was like maybe 80. He was barely walking, but he had like a huge gun holstered on his belt. And we even asked him, right, is it a true gun? Yes, it's a true gun, right? So that's totally bizarre, because in Europe, if you go to a supermarket or places where there are money, there's money, no security will not have guns. I mean, only police has guns. It's possible as a citizen to get a gun in Poland, and we have like a large a very big hunting culture. But no one's carrying around. Security in shops doesn't have guns, and so kind of seeing guns everywhere is a bit bizarre. And when you talked with coworkers from Texas, well, that's when it started to go absurd, right? So hey, do you have guns? Yes, I have. I even have a Kalashnikov in my basement, right? So and for a European, that's weird, because
It's a shock. It's a shock.
I can appreciate the only kind of something way I can understand is like a hobby, right? That you like to shoot, like to collect guns,
right?
But to just keep there in your house, and
a lot of time it's for protection, but then there are some people that like to collect them as well.
Yeah, so so certainly the gun culture is a shock, and it shouldn't be, right? And the last two they shouldn't be shocks, because the one about freedom is a shock, because when you are in Europe, so with the dominance of American pop culture on TV and things like that, you are constantly kind of bombarded with that message about freedom, this, freedom, that, free, right? And then you go there, and it's something else.
It's not
right?
the case.
The same is that you are bombarded with how great America is, and how wealthy it is, and you go there and it really doesn't look that way. I mean, the infrastructure in America sucks. I mean, California, so it all look old. So much of America, and again, I've been in certain places, right?
I know you've traveled a lot of places. Exactly.
Not be whole US, but much of US looks like it was basically built in the 60s and left to rot. Especially those.
I mean, if you go to Detroit, you will be absolutely shocked. Where I'm from, you will be shocked.
Yeah, but everyone knows about Detroit. And
you went to a nicer part of the US, even.
It doesn't look anything like the kind of
in the movies
or series. To give you some idea, if you are, for many of Polish people, kind of idea of US is what is shown on, for example, on Friends, right? Well, I'm quite certain that today renting an apartment the size of where Rachel and Monica were living today in New York is out of possibilities to like probably 99.9% of Americans, right? So it's like there's a lot of like propaganda of success in that pop culture, which when you go there you find out that it really doesn't look that way, and it's a bit of a shock.
Okay, well, thank you.
Even if you expect it's still a bit of a shock. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I appreciate that, Dominic. I think you covered a lot. There's a lot of things that were shocking about the United States. Some of them I expected, some of them I did not. So you touched on some things that were quite interesting to me. So thank you for that. So these were the shocks of a Polish man in America. So thank you, Dominic.
Yeah. Happy to talk about my experiences, and see you guys next time.
Okay, see you guys.
See you.
Take care, everyone.